The champagne glass shattered against the marble floor, and Delilah watched red wine spread like blood across the white tile of their soul penthouse. 3 days into their honeymoon, and she'd just discovered the truth Jackson had been hiding. "You knew," Delilah said, her voice deadly calm as she faced her new husband across the room. "You knew your uncle was planning to challenge your position, and you brought me here anyway." Jackson stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, his tattooed hands clenched into fists, his reflection in the glass showing a man caught between two worlds. "I thought I could handle it," he admitted, his Korean accent thicker with stress. You thought you could protect me by lying?" Delilah interrupted, and she heard her own anger mixing with hurt. "That's not how this works, Jackson. We're supposed to be partners." "Partners don't belong in war zones," Jackson shot back, finally turning to face her, and the anguish in his dark eyes made her chest ache. "My uncle wants me dead, Delilah. Dead. And he's using you, our marriage, as proof that I've gone soft, that I've abandoned tradition for." He stopped, but she heard what he didn't say. "For a Black American woman who doesn't understand our world." The door burst open before Delilah could respond, and David rushed in, his usually composed face showing panic. "Boss, they've moved up the timeline. The challenge is happening tonight. All the family heads are already gathering at the estate. Tonight." Jackson's expression went from anguish to lethal in a heartbeat. "That's not possible. The formal challenge was supposed to be next week." "Your uncle doesn't play by rules," David said grimly. "He's convinced half the families that you're unfit. If you don't show up and defend your position, they'll vote him in by default." Delilah watched her husband transform before her eyes, watched the gentle man who played piano and brought his mother flowers disappear behind the mask of the Mafia king, and something fierce awakened in her chest. "Then we go," she said, and both men turned to stare at her. "Absolutely not," Jackson said immediately. "Delilah, you don't understand what you're suggesting." "I understand perfectly," Delilah interrupted, moving to stand in front of him, refusing to back down even when he looked at her with that cold, dangerous expression. "Your uncle thinks I make you weak, so we're going to walk into that room and show him exactly how strong we are together." "This isn't some business meeting," Jackson said, his voice dropping to that tone that made grown men flinch. "These are the heads of the most dangerous crime families in Asia. One wrong word, one perceived disrespect, and they'll kill you just to prove a point." "Then I won't say the wrong word," Delilah replied calmly, and she saw surprise flicker across his face. "Jackson, I didn't marry you to be some kept wife who hides when things get dangerous. I married you to be your partner, your equal, and that means standing beside you even when, especially when, it's terrifying." For a long moment, Jackson just looked at her, and then his tattooed hand came up to cup her face with heartbreaking gentleness. "You're either the bravest woman I've ever met, or the most insane. Can't I be both?" Delilah asked, and she saw the ghost of a smile touch his lips. "David," Jackson said without looking away from his wife, "call my mother. Tell her we need the traditional wedding hanbok prepared. If Delilah's walking into that viper's nest, she's doing it dressed like the queen she is." 1 hour later, Delilah stood in front of a mirror wearing the most beautiful garment she'd ever seen. A traditional Korean hanbok in deep crimson silk with intricate gold embroidery that caught the light with every movement. Her natural hair had been styled into an elegant updo woven with jade pins that Jackson's mother had pressed into her hands with tears in her eyes. "My son chose well," Mrs. Kim had whispered in English, her accent heavy but her meaning clear. "Now show them all why." The Kim family estate loomed in the darkness like a fortress, all traditional architecture hiding modern security, and as their car approached, Delilah could see dozens of black vehicles already parked, each one carrying a family head who would decide whether Jackson lived or died tonight. "Last chance to change your mind," Jackson said quietly, his hand finding hers in the darkness. "Not happening," Delilah replied, squeezing his tattooed fingers. "We're in this together, remember?" The car stopped, and before the driver could open the door, Jackson leaned over and kissed her, soft and desperate, and full of something that felt like goodbye. "Whatever happens in there," he whispered against her lips, "know that you were the best thing that ever happened to me." "Nothing's happening," Delilah said fiercely. "We're walking in together, and we're walking out together, end of story." But as they stepped out of the car, and she saw the armed guards lining the entrance, saw the cold eyes watching their arrival, Delilah wondered if she'd just made a promise she couldn't keep. The great hall was packed with men in expensive suits and women in traditional dress, all of them turning to stare as Jackson and Delilah entered hand in hand. The whispers started immediately, some in Korean that she couldn't understand, others in English clearly meant for her to hear. "That's her. The black girl. Does she even understand what's happening? She's beautiful, I'll give him that. Beautiful won't save her when this goes bad." Delilah kept her head high, her hands steady in Jackson's, and refused to let them see her fear. At the far end of the hall, seated on what looked like a throne, was Jackson's uncle, a man in his 50s with cold eyes and a smile that promised violence. "Nephew," he called out in perfect English, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent room. "How kind of you to join us, and you brought your bride. How unexpected." Jackson's grip on Delilah's hand tightened as they walked deeper into the hall, every eye tracking their movement, every breath held waiting for the confrontation that would decide everything. "Uncle," Jackson replied, his voice carrying the authority of someone born to lead. "I heard you had concerns about my leadership. Say them now, in front of everyone. No more whispers and schemes." The uncle's smile widened, cruel and satisfied. "Very well. I challenge your right to inherit the Kim Empire on the grounds that you have abandoned our traditions, weakened our position, and chosen personal pleasure over family duty. Your marriage to this outsider proves you are unfit to lead." The hall erupted in murmurs, some nodding in agreement, others watching to see how Jackson would respond. But before he could speak, his mother's voice rang out clear and sharp. "If you truly believe she weakens him, test her," Mrs. Kim said, standing from her seat with regal dignity. "But stop hiding behind cowardice and challenge her directly. Or are you afraid of what you might find?" Delilah felt ice slide down her spine as all eyes turned to her. This was it, the moment that would define everything. She could feel Jackson's tension, knew he was seconds from refusing, from trying to protect her. "What kind of test?" Delilah asked before he could speak, and her voice didn't shake even though her heart was hammering. The uncle's eyes gleamed with malice. "A simple one. If you truly belong in this family, if you truly understand our world, then prove you're willing to do what's necessary to protect it." He gestured, and two guards dragged a man forward, bloodied and beaten, throwing him to the floor at Delilah's feet. The uncle held out a gun, ornate and deadly, handle first. "This man betrayed our organization, stole from us, endangered all of our lives. Tradition demands he be executed. You do it, right here, right now, and I'll accept your place in this family." The room went deadly silent. Delilah could feel Jackson's entire body coiled beside her, ready to refuse, to end this before it went any further. But she understood what was happening. This wasn't about the traitor. This was about proving she was too soft, too American, too weak to survive in their world. "Delilah, no," Jackson whispered urgently, his lips barely moving. "We'll find another way." But Delilah was already moving, taking the gun from the uncle's hand, feeling its weight, cold and heavy and final. She looked down at the man on the floor, really looked, and saw something in his eyes that made her chest tighten, not defiance, but resignation, like he'd already accepted his death. "What did you steal?" she asked him directly, her voice clear in the silent hall. The man looked up, surprised to be spoken to like a person rather than a problem. "Money," he rasped, his English heavily accented. "For my daughter's surgery. They said it wasn't important enough, said family business came first, so I took what I needed to save her life." Delilah felt something click into place, felt the weight of dozens of eyes on her, felt the moment balanced on a knife's edge. She could pull the trigger, prove she was ruthless enough to belong, or she could refuse and prove the uncle right. Is this true? She asked, looking at the uncle. What does it matter? He scoffed. He stole from the family. The punishment is death. That's our law. No, Delilah said, and she lowered the gun. That's not law. That's cruelty. And if this family's power is built on killing desperate fathers trying to save their children, then maybe your uncle is right. Maybe it does need new leadership. The hall erupted in chaos, some shouting in anger, others in agreement. But Delilah kept talking, her voice rising above the noise. You want to know if I belong here? If I understand your world? I do. I understand that power without mercy is just tyranny. I understand that tradition without compassion is just an excuse to hurt people. And I understand that this man, she gestured to the beaten figure on the floor, is exactly the kind of person a real family should protect, not execute. She turned to face the room, to face all those dangerous, powerful people who could kill her with a word. My husband rejected 99 women because they wanted his empire, not him. Well, I don't want your empire either, but I'll fight for the man I married. And I'll fight for a family that values loyalty and love over blind obedience and fear. If that makes me unfit, then I guess I am. Silence, absolute and suffocating. And then Jackson's father stood, James Kim, the man who'd once threatened to destroy her, now looking at her with something that might have been respect. The girl speaks with the wisdom of a true matriarch, he said in Korean, then switched to English. She has passed the test, not the one my brother designed, but the one that actually matters. She has shown mercy tempered with strength, compassion balanced with courage. These are the qualities of a true leader. This is absurd, the uncle shouted, his face red with rage. She refused a direct order. She showed weakness. She showed humanity. Another voice interrupted, and an elderly woman stood, her traditional hanbok marking her as one of the family matriarchs. Something this family has forgotten in our pursuit of power. I vote to uphold Jackson Kim as rightful heir, with his wife as equal partner in leadership. One by one, other voices joined hers, family heads standing to voice their support. Not all of them, but enough, more than enough, and Delilah watched the uncle's face twist with fury as he realized he'd lost. This isn't over, he hissed at Jackson, but there was fear beneath the anger now. Actually, it is, Jackson said coldly, and there was something terrifying in his calm. Guards, escort my uncle out. He's no longer welcome in Kim family business. His assets will be redistributed to those who remained loyal. As the guards moved to comply, as the uncle was dragged away shouting threats and curses, Delilah felt her legs start to shake, the adrenaline crashing. Jackson's arm came around her waist, steadying her. You're insane, he whispered in her ear. Brilliantly, terrifyingly insane. Did it work? Delilah whispered back. Did we win? We didn't just win, Jackson said, and when she looked up at him, his smile was blazing. You just became the most powerful woman in the Korean Mafia, and I don't think you even realize it yet. The celebration that followed felt surreal. Family heads who'd been ready to watch her husband die now bowing to them both. Offering congratulations and pledges of loyalty, Delilah smiled and nodded and tried not to think about how close they'd come to disaster. You need to eat something, Maya's voice cut through her thoughts, and Delilah turned to see her best friend pushing through the crowd with a plate of food. Maya? What are you doing here? Did you really think I'd let you face the Korean Mafia alone? Maya grinned, pressing the plate into her hands. Jackson's mom flew me out this morning, said you might need backup. Delilah felt tears prick her eyes. I could have gotten you killed. Please, I've survived New York rent prices. I can handle anything, Maya joked, but her expression turned serious. Girl, do you have any idea what you just did? You didn't just save Jackson's position, you completely changed the power dynamic. Those old men are terrified of you now. They should be. Another voice joined them, and Delilah turned to see an elegant Korean woman in her 40s, dressed in a designer suit that screamed power. I'm Min Seo Park, head of the Park family, and I've been waiting 20 years for someone to stand up to the old guard like you just did. I just said what needed to be said, Delilah replied carefully, still not sure who she could trust. And that's exactly why you're dangerous, Minesio said with a smile. Most of us learn to play their game, to smile and bow and let the men think they're in charge, but you walked in and changed the rules entirely. Tell me, Mrs. Kim, what are you planning to do with all this newfound power? Delilah opened her mouth to say she wasn't planning anything, that she just wanted to go back to her normal life. But then she looked around the room, at the women standing in the shadows of their powerful husbands, at the guards who dragged a desperate father in to die, at the system that valued profit over people. I'm going to change everything, she heard herself say, and Minesio's smile turned sharp. Good. Then you'll need allies, and I know exactly where to start. Over the next few hours, Delilah found herself in a private room with 7 of the most powerful women in the Korean underground, wives and daughters and sisters of family heads, all of them looking at her with a mixture of hope and calculation. The men won't like this, one of them warned, a woman named Jwoo whose husband controlled shipping routes. They'll see it as a threat. Let them, Delilah said, and she was surprised by the steel in her own voice. I'm not trying to overthrow anyone. I'm trying to make things better, starting with that man who stole to save his daughter. How many more people are suffering because this organization puts profit before people? Dozens, Minesio admitted quietly. Families who need medical care, children who need education, people who just need help but can't ask because they're afraid of being seen as weak. Then we change that, Delilah said firmly. We start a fund, officially for family welfare. Use it to help people who need it. No questions asked, no death sentences for desperate parents. Your husband will have to approve it, another woman pointed out. He's the heir. Then I'll convince him, Delilah said. Besides, he told me himself, we're partners. She found Jackson an hour later, standing on a balcony overlooking the garden, his tattooed hands gripping the railing like he was trying to hold himself together. Hey, she said softly, coming to stand beside him. You okay? I almost lost you tonight, he said without looking at her, and his voice was raw. When you took that gun, when I thought you might actually. I've never been so terrified in my life. But I didn't, Delilah reminded him gently. I made the right choice, and it worked. This time, Jackson said, finally turning to face her. But Delilah, you need to understand, this world, my world, it's dangerous in ways you can't imagine. What happened tonight will have consequences, my uncle won't just disappear. He'll regroup. He'll come back harder. Then we'll be ready, Delilah said, taking his hands. Together, remember? Jackson pulled her close, his forehead resting against hers. You're too brave for your own good. I learned from the best, Delilah murmured. Now, I need to talk to you about something. I want to start a family welfare fund, officially sanctioned, to help people who need it. She expected resistance, expected him to say it was too dangerous, too expensive, too soft, but instead Jackson smiled. I was wondering when you'd bring that up. My mother already approved the budget. Apparently she's been wanting to do something similar for years, but the old guard kept blocking it. And now you've scattered the old guard like leaves, Jackson said. Welcome to power, my queen. The attack came 3 weeks later, when Delilah was visiting the youth center Jackson had told her about, the place where he taught taekwondo to kids trying to stay off the streets. She was reading to a group of children when the windows exploded inward. Get down. David's voice cut through the chaos, and Delilah found herself being shoved behind a desk as gunfire erupted. She could hear children screaming, could smell smoke and blood and fear. It was over in minutes, but those minutes felt like hours. When silence finally fell, Delilah looked up to see David bleeding from a shoulder wound, 3 of Jackson's men down, and the children huddled in terror. Is anyone hurt? She asked, her voice surprisingly steady as she moved to check on the kids. Everyone okay? A little girl, maybe 6 years old, clung to her dress, and Delilah scooped her up automatically, making soothing sounds while her mind raced. This was the uncle's retaliation. It had to be, but attacking a youth center? Attacking children? Mrs. Kim, we need to get you out of here, David said urgently, his face pale from blood loss. More could be coming. Then get these children somewhere safe first, Delilah interrupted. Call their families, make sure they're protected, and David, sit down before you pass out. Someone get me a first aid kit. She worked on autopilot, tending to wounds and calming terrified kids while part of her brain observed from a distance, marveling at how calm she felt, how focused. This was what Jackson's world really looked like, not glamorous nightclubs and expensive restaurants, but blood and fear and children caught in crossfire. Her phone rang, Jackson's name flashing on the screen. I'm okay, she said before he could speak. David's injured but stable. 3 of your men are down. The kids are scared but physically fine. I'm 5 minutes away. Jackson's voice was deadly calm, the kind of calm that meant someone was going to die. Delilah, I need you to listen carefully. This was a message. My uncle is declaring war. I know, Delilah said quietly, watching the little girl in her arms finally start to calm. Jackson, he targeted children. I know, and he's going to regret it, Jackson promised, and the violence in his voice should have scared her, but instead Delilah felt something cold and hard settle in her chest. Good, she said, because I'm done playing defense. When Jackson arrived with what looked like a small army, he found Delilah sitting calmly in the wreckage. The children clustered around her while she told them a story about a brave queen who fought dragons. His eyes met hers across the room, and something passed between them, an understanding, a declaration. Take them home, he said to his men, gesturing to the children. Full security details on every family. I want protection on everyone connected to this center, and someone get David to a hospital. Then he crossed to Delilah, helped her stand, and pulled her into his arms. You should have run, he murmured into her hair. You should have gotten yourself to safety. I'm exactly where I need to be, Delilah replied, and when she pulled back to look at him, her eyes were hard. Your uncle made a mistake. He thought attacking children would make me afraid, make me want to leave your world, but all he did was make me angry. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to teach me everything about this empire, every business, every connection, every weakness, and then we're going to dismantle your uncle piece by piece until he has nothing left but the choice you gave him, exile or death. Jackson stared at her, and slowly, his expression shifted from concern to something that looked like awe. You're not joking. Do I look like I'm joking? Delilah asked. He came after children, Jackson, children you've been protecting, trying to help. If this is what your world looks like, then I'm not just going to survive in it. I'm going to change it, starting with making sure monsters like your uncle never have power again. This isn't going to be easy, Jackson warned. It's going to be dangerous, bloody, and you'll have to make choices that will haunt you. Then we'll be haunted together, Delilah said simply. Now, where do we start? The war room in Jackson's Manhattan penthouse looked like something out of a movie, walls covered in screens showing security feeds, financial data, and surveillance photos. A dozen people worked at computers, tracking every move the uncle made. Delilah stood at the center of it all, learning to read the empire like a book. This is his main source of income, Minessio explained, pointing to a shipping manifest on one of the screens. Container ships running between Seoul and Los Angeles, mostly legitimate cargo, but about 20% is smuggling, weapons, luxury goods, occasionally people. People. Delilah felt her stomach turn. You mean trafficking? Welcome to the ugly side of the family business, Minessio said grimly. It's why some of us were so ready to support you. We've been trying to shut down the trafficking operations for years, but the old guard makes too much money from it. Delilah looked at Jackson, who stood across the room talking to David and several other men, his tattooed hands gesturing as he gave orders. When he felt her gaze, he looked up, and she saw the question in his eyes. Does our family do this? She asked quietly. Does the Kim Empire traffic people? Not anymore, Jackson said, crossing to stand beside her. My father was involved years ago. Before I took over, it was the first thing I shut down when I became heir, but other families still do it, including my uncle. Then that's where we hit him, Delilah decided. Not just financially, but legally. We expose the trafficking ring, feed information to the international authorities, let them shut it down. That's risky, David warned, his shoulders still bandaged from the attack. It could expose other operations, bring too much attention to all of us. Good, Delilah said firmly. Maybe it's time for this whole organization to come out of the shadows. The legitimate parts can stay legitimate, and the illegal parts, we shut them down or we risk being shut down ourselves. I'm not interested in running an empire built on human misery. The room fell silent, everyone staring at her, and Delilah realized she'd just proposed something revolutionary, not just attacking the uncle, but fundamentally changing how the entire organization operated. She's right. Jackson's voice cut through the silence. We've been doing things the old way for too long. It's made us rich, but it's also made us vulnerable. One good investigation and everything falls apart. But if we clean up our operations, go legitimate where we can, we become untouchable. The other families won't like it, someone warned. They'll see it as weakness, another added. Let them, Delilah said, and she was surprised by how confident she sounded. We're not asking permission, we're setting an example. The families who want to join us in building something better, will help them transition. The ones who want to keep dealing in human misery, will shut them down, starting with Jackson's uncle. Over the next 3 days, Delilah learned more about the criminal underworld than she'd ever wanted to know. She met with financial analysts who showed her how to launder money, with lawyers who explained the intricacies of international law, with former traffickers who broke down crying as they described what they'd done and why they wanted out. And every night, she fell into bed with Jackson, both of them exhausted and haunted by what they'd learned, but more determined than ever to see this through. I was wrong, he told her one night, holding her close in the darkness. When I first met you, I thought I was protecting you by keeping you separate from this world. But you were never meant to be protected. You were meant to change everything. We're changing it together, Delilah corrected, her fingers tracing the tattoos on his chest. You started this, with the youth center, with shutting down the trafficking, with trying to be better than your father. I'm just finishing what you began. My queen, he murmured, and kissed her like she was his salvation. The strike happened on a Tuesday. Coordinated raids in 3 countries simultaneously. Authorities shut down the uncle's shipping operation, freed 87 people who'd been held for trafficking, and seized enough weapons to start a small war. The news coverage was international, massive, and devastating. Delilah watched it unfold on the screens in the war room, watched the uncle's empire crumble in real time, and felt nothing but cold satisfaction. He'll retaliate, David warned. This will make him desperate. I'm counting on it, Delilah said quietly. Because desperate men make mistakes. The retaliation came that night, not against Jackson, but against his mother. Armed men broke into her house, but they found it empty. She was already safe in the penthouse, surrounded by guards, waiting. He's predictable, Mrs. Kim said calmly, sipping tea while her son's men fortified the building. Always going for the emotional targets. He thinks women are weak points. Are we? Delilah asked. Only if we let ourselves be, Mrs. Kim replied. Which is why you and I need to have a talk about what comes next, because taking down one man isn't enough. If you truly want to change this world, you need to think bigger. The meeting happened in neutral territory, a restaurant in Manhattan that had been cleared of customers, just the heads of the major crime families, their wives and heirs, and one Black American woman who'd somehow become the center of it all. Delilah wore a simple black dress, her natural hair in elegant braids, no weapons except her words. Thank you for coming, she said, standing at the head of the table while Jackson sat at her right hand, his support silent but absolute. I know some of you think I'm naive, that I don't understand how this world works, but I understand perfectly. I understand that we're all sitting on a powder keg, one investigation, one betrayal, one mistake, and everything we've built burns down. She gestured to a screen behind her, showing news coverage of the trafficking raid, of politicians promising to crack down on organized crime, of public outrage demanding action. This is what happens when we let monsters like Jackson's uncle operate unchecked. They bring attention, they bring heat, and they make all of us vulnerable. So here's what I'm proposing. We go legitimate as we can. The businesses that can be legal, we make legal. The operations that can't, we shut down or we hand off to people outside our families. That's crazy, someone objected. We'd lose millions, we'd lose billions if we end up in prison, Delilah interrupted calmly. And more importantly, we'd lose our families, our children, our future. Is that really worth it? For what? More money we don't need? More power we can't use? She looked around the table, meeting eyes, refusing to back down. I was a waitress 3 months ago. I worked 3 jobs just to survive, and you know what I learned? That real power isn't about how much money you have or how many people you can hurt. It's about how many people you can help, how many lives you can make better. Jackson's uncle had all the power in the world, and what did he do with it? He trafficked people, he hurt children, he destroyed everything he touched. And where is he now? She asked rhetorically. Hiding, broken, with nothing left but his hatred. Is that what you want? Or do you want to build something better? Minicio stood, her elegant suit making her look like a CEO rather than a crime boss's wife. I support Mrs. Kim's proposal. The Park family will begin transitioning our legitimate businesses out of the shadows, and we'll shut down any operations that can't be made legal. One by one, other voices joined hers. Not all of them. Some families left the meeting angry, threatening their own retaliation, but enough stayed, more than enough, and by the time the sun rose the next morning, Delilah had managed something impossible. She'd started a revolution. The final confrontation with the uncle came a week later. In the ruins of his shipping warehouse, surrounded by federal agents and reporters, he was arrested live on television, dragged out in handcuffs while the world watched, and as the cameras panned across the crowd, they caught Jackson and Delilah standing together, his tattooed hand in hers, united. How does it feel? A reporter shouted. To take down one of the most powerful men in the Korean Mafia? Delilah looked at the camera, looked at the millions of people watching, and smiled. I didn't take him down. He took himself down. I just refused to let him take everyone else with him. And that's the message I want to send. To anyone who thinks power means hurting people, your time is over. There's a new generation coming, and we're building something better. That night, back in their penthouse, Delilah and Jackson stood on the balcony watching the city lights, exhausted and exhilarated and terrified of what came next. You know this isn't over, Jackson said quietly. There will be others who try to challenge us, who think we're weak because we're trying to do the right thing. Let them try, Delilah replied, leaning into his warmth. We'll face them together, just like we faced your uncle, just like we'll face everything else. My queen, Jackson murmured, and she heard the awe in his voice. You were supposed to be this simple thing, this one good thing in my dark world, but you became so much more. I became your partner, Delilah corrected. Your equal, your wife, and yeah, apparently you're co-ruler of a criminal empire that's slowly becoming less criminal. Who knew waitressing would prepare me for this? Jackson laughed, the sound full of joy and relief and love, and pulled her into a kiss that promised forever. So what now? He asked when they finally broke apart. Now, Delilah smiled. Now we change the world, one family at a time, one business at a time, one life at a time. And Jackson? Yeah. Now I'm ready for you to ask me that question again, the one about marriage, because I think I finally understand what it means to be your wife. His eyes widened. You mean, let's have the wedding we never got. The one where everyone knows exactly who we are and what we stand for. The one where we make vows in front of both our worlds, showing them that love doesn't make you weak, it makes you unstoppable. Jackson dropped to one knee right there on the balcony, pulling out a ring he'd apparently been carrying for weeks, a simple band with a single diamond, elegant and perfect. Delilah Monroe Kim, he said formally, his Korean accent wrapping around her name like a prayer. Will you marry me again? Will you stand beside me as we build this empire into something worthy of you? Will you be my queen, my partner, my everything? Yes, Delilah said, tears streaming down her face. Yes to everything. And as he slipped the ring onto her finger, as they kissed under the Manhattan stars, somewhere in the city below, the world kept turning, but it was turning towards something better, something they'd built together, a Korean mafia boss and his Black American queen, proving that love really could conquer empires. 6 months later, the second wedding was nothing like the first. This time, the cathedral was filled not just with crime families, but with the people they'd helped, the kids from the youth center, the families saved from trafficking, the workers whose businesses had been legitimized. Delilah walked down the aisle in a dress that blended Korean and American traditions, her natural braids woven with traditional Korean ornaments, her mother on one side and Mrs. Kim on the other, both women beaming with pride. And at the altar, Jackson waited, his tattoos on full display, his suit traditional Korean rather than Western, and when their eyes met, Delilah saw her whole future reflected back. It wouldn't be easy. There would be more challenges, more enemies, more battles to fight. But they'd face them together, king and queen of an empire they were transforming with every choice, every mercy, every moment of choosing love over fear. Ready? The officiant asked in both Korean and English. Ready, they said together, and sealed their vows with a kiss that promised war and peace, darkness and light, everything that came with ruling an empire built on love rather than fear. And as they walked back down the aisle as husband and wife for the second time, Delilah knew this was just the beginning. Their story wasn't over, it was evolving, and this time, she was writing it herself. Thank you for watching part 2 of Jackson and Delilah's incredible journey. If you loved seeing Delilah become a queen and transform the entire Korean mafia, smash that like button. Did you see that coming? Comment Queen Delilah if you're obsessed. Part 3 is coming soon. Wedding, babies, and a new enemy that will threaten everything they've built. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss it. Share this with everyone who needs to see a strong Black woman ruling empires. See you in part 3. Crown 2 Hearts.